All right, guys, a very warm welcome to yet another webinar in the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series. Today, we are bringing together Citrix, obviously, with AMD and Microsoft to talk about a very interesting topic. Today, you'll get to hear how these three technologies are coming together to basically help you empower modern desktops and workstations in the cloud. A few housekeeping details. This webinar is being recorded and we'll send you the recording within the next 24 hours. There is a questions panel if you notice on your GoToWebinar interface. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask them there. If they are specific to you, to audio issues, etc., we'll try and answer them on chat. If they are relevant to the entire audience, we have a formal Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So let me, at this point, bring in the speakers for the webinar. Isidro, thank you for joining the webinar. Can you tell our audience quickly who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Rubal. My name is Isidro Gonzalez. I'm the Market Dev Manager for data center GPUs here at AMD. So my job is to enable the data centers around the world with a GPU capability. So happy to be here to talk about what we're doing with Citrix.
Thank you so much. And next up, my good friend and my colleague, Nitin. You want to go quickly tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Rubal. My name is Nitin Sharma, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Citrix, mostly covering underneath the Citrix Workspace Services umbrella, specifically focused within the virtual app and desktop portfolio of our Citrix Workspace product.
Awesome, thanks. And last but not the least, Kevin, thank you for joining the webinar.
Sure, thanks, Rubal. My name is Kevin Rains. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for High Performance Computing at Microsoft, which includes Visualization. So my role is really around go-to-market around all those workloads.
Awesome, thanks. All right, guys, before we get into it, I just want to talk quickly about what Citrix Ready is and what we're trying to do through this series of webinars. If you could help me switch to the next slide, please. So we've been in existence for 12 plus years now, and you know what our bread and butter at Citrix Ready is to really integrate technologies with Citrix products. And you know, if you notice, what we've been able to do over these years is to really create an ecosystem of our partner technologies. So in case you want to you know, explore any partner technologies that are compatible one or more Citrix products, you know, we do have a marketplace. You'll find a URL mentioned on this slide. Please do take a look and you know, look at all the great technologies that partners like AMD and Microsoft and others have built. Next slide, please. We also have a you know, promotion running with this webinar. You may have noticed it on our email promotions as well. So every 10th attendee on this webinar will receive a set of wireless earbuds. Unfortunately, we can only do it in the US right now because of some logistics challenges. And you'll get to hear about more on how to claim your gift at the end of this webinar. So please stay tuned. With that and without further ado, let me just hand this over to Nitin to talk through his slides. Over to you, Nitin.
Thanks, Rubal. And for the audience on the line, apologies if you hear me pause a little bit extra. I'm waiting for the slide to transition over on my end. So one of the key things is, before we get into the actual aspect of some of the details, specifically a lot of the new announcements from the AMD team, I wanted to highlight just basically one of our main goals of working together is specifically improving that end user experience. So when you're talking about Citrix, specifically when we're working with our partners like AMD, it's how do we, you know, create a workspace that has all of the apps and desktops and the tools that the end users need without necessarily impacting their experience and creating that local-like experience. Because as folks that know, if you're existing Citrix customers today or you're evaluating a virtualization solution, all of those, you know, all of the corporate resources for an end user are not on that local device. So it's very imperative to, you know, sort of create or to go with a solution that's aimed to provide that end user with that local-like experience, regardless of the device that they're using. From our perspective, we're looking at improving the, you know, using virtualization and improving the end user experience is essentially top of mind. Yes, there's security and administrative tools that are involved that we also look at and focus on from our product engineering teams on creating that comprehensive solution. But a solution's not going to be well adopted within an infrastructure if the end users have a really poor experience. Our intentions are when we create our solution itself, and we look at innovating features, it's increasing that productivity regardless of the device that the end users are using. So, and that includes specifically also working alongside with AMD is creating a seamless experience of graphics, specific graphic intensive apps and desktops to be delivered regardless of the endpoint that the users are on. So specifically, a lot of low-cost endpoints that may not have the CPU capabilities on the actual device to still be able to render that graphically intensive application. We'll go into, I'll touch on a little bit from how Citrix is doing it, and then Isidro covers specifically how AMD is doing it, and together how we're sort of delivering that optimized user experience. Now, outside of the end user experience, it's also delivering robust admin tools to help manage this modern day infrastructure and also improving the administrative experience. So one of the key things that I like to show, one of the slides here, just wait for it to switch over there. Let's see, sorry about that. Looks like I'm having a little bit of delay on mine. Yeah, I'm having a little trouble. I see your oh, there it goes. So I like to use this slide. Kind of talks about how we at Citrix are innovating with each VDA release that we do. When we're talking about VDA, if you're not an existing Citrix customer, it's the virtual delivery agent. So the virtual delivery agent is essentially going to be what's installed on either the backend data center or what you're going to be utilizing when you start moving workloads to a public cloud like Azure. The key thing that I want to highlight here is it breaks down the various knowledge worker, task workers, the type of worker that it is, and each version that we release as we do our quarterly releases. This is our, showcasing exactly how we're optimizing the CPU utilization over time. Now, the significance of this, if you're an on-prem customer or using on-prem, workloads for Citrix infrastructure, it's optimizing that CPU in the backend data center. So you're optimizing, your data center itself. And if you're running these workloads in a public cloud like Azure, this also helps you optimize the cloud consumption costs that are typically associated when you start leveraging a virtualization solution within, Azure. And a lot of that backbone of our end user experience is part of our Citrix HDX technology. Now, existing Citrix customers may be familiar with this. This is essentially our protocol and what we utilize to help deliver that high definition user experience across, no matter where the user is, what device that they're using, what network connection they're on. Our intention is to actually optimize that experience of that virtual apps and desktops for that Citrix workspace, even if their network connections are really poor. But also delivering that local-like experience because all of that's being streamed from somewhere else. Like being able to plug and play various USB type peripherals within your virtual app and desktop. If an administrator wants to allow that, we actually have a multitude of different things that we do to improve the multimedia experience. We also optimize, the HDX technologies optimize unified communications. So a big reason and a big important thing for this year specifically, as more and more organizations started having remote users and leveraging tools like Microsoft Teams. Citrix is we are one of the first to market to deliver an optimized virtualization solution for Microsoft Teams. And we use adaptive orchestration, so this kind of helps optimize and sort of, in a nutshell, optimize that bandwidth traffic when it comes to leveraging that workspace. And most importantly, we also work with a lot of our vendors to improve graphics acceleration, specifically when it comes to deploying virtual apps like CAD applications. And we have a long-standing partnership with AMD in helping actually improve those sort of graphically intensive workloads. And taking one click down in the next slide, hope I didn't click too fast there. taking it one click down, this kind of showcases some of the new stuff that we've released in the past couple years. The key thing I want to highlight here is essentially even though you're delivering a graphically intensive application, we're also still optimizing that bandwidth utilization when it comes to accessing those workloads across a virtual, remotely or across like a wide area network. But we've also introduced a number of things where, DPI matching on Windows 10, so it matches that whatever the screen resolution that the user's accessing a virtual app on desktop, it matches that resolution coming from the back end of the DDA. But we also improve like build to lossless image quality. So essentially what we're trying to highlight here is basically how it is that we're delivering that local-like experience for a virtual app or desktop. Now, going on to the next step as far as like what it is that we're looking at, and we know this because Microsoft initially released Windows Virtual Desktop, last year or a couple of years ago, and then Citrix is helping customers sort of simplify and accelerate their journey over to Azure, and we actually help improve that Windows Virtual Desktop experience when being delivered through Citrix. So the first thing is we actually can help customers enable sort of that hybrid cloud, because while WVD must be on Azure only, we recognize that customers might not be able to go to Azure all at once, and a hybrid cloud strategy that Citrix supplies is required for that transition. Second, Citrix technologies can actually help optimize the operations, from Azure compute to compute costs. We'll take a deeper dive in some of these cost-saving features in a couple slides that I have. And lastly, Citrix, technologies add sort of that other layer of security on top of Microsoft's intelligent security with advanced policy and data protection controls. The relevancy as far as like when you're looking at this webinar is, when we're talking about the MVV4 instance, it's going to be in Azure, and some customers may be looking at, some of the folks on the call may be looking at Windows Virtual Desktop and how, for sort of temporary use cases or maybe a small segment of their workforce. So we're basically highlighting exactly like the value that Citrix plays in that story. So going into the first aspect, sort of that enabling that hybrid cloud experience or deployment, only Citrix manages any on-prem virtualization deployment alongside Windows Virtual Desktop for that smoothest transition to Azure. So, I mean, some customers that have a challenge, they're ready to modernize, but moving their entire org to Azure is seen as sort of like a multi-year effort. There's some sort of cost uncertainty existing in the data center, data sovereignty, compliance, and regulation. Allow or require some users to keep some of their workloads on-prem. So when you're looking at Citrix to deploy Windows Virtual Desktops, some of the key advantages that we provide is sort of that hybrid cloud deployment with Citrix Cloud Services and Azure. So essentially allows customers, to migrate on-prem workloads to Windows Virtual Desktop at their schedule while rolling out, new scenarios or business continuity, capacity in Azure right away. Citrix Cloud Services also show like detailed insights into the overall scalability and performance of like, the resources as far as like, and then help you mitigate cost concerns. There's administrative tools that offer sort of that seamless management access across WVD and on-prem workloads, also with enterprise analytics to monitor global performance and security. In a nutshell, some of the key, metrics that we've been able to see is like, there's an IDC surveyed some organizations that ran Citrix on Azure with VDI workloads, and they achieved about a 55% lower workload per cost per user per year versus legacy on-premises environments. And we also feature what's called the Citrix auto scale technology, which allows you to scale Azure resources up or down based off your user needs, as and you could basically obtain up to like a 75% savings on overall Azure compute and storage needs. So essentially, like this is some sort of, when customers are looking at Windows virtual desktops, they could be looking at it from a hybrid cloud approach. And then these are some of the advantages that you get when you're looking at Citrix to help with that shift over. And just kind of waiting for the next slide to pop up. Nope, looks like I jumped too far ahead there. And then, so essentially, we optimize the operation. So we streamline the the deployments and the lifecycle maintenance of it. Key thing here that I wanted to highlight is, we basically will, faster access to new features and functionality. So going back to the IDC report, we calculate a value of productivity related to faster deployment of VDI resources, at like about $382 per user per year. Users can have faster login times to their virtual apps and desktops. They also have basically over 70% improvement of single, server capacity. Let's trying to switch over here. And that kind of highlights the fact that these are sort of the top 10 Citrix value adds that we give to WVD. So if you're a customer looking at deploying and running Windows 10 and graphically intensive applications on MVB4, when you're using Citrix on top of that, you get the additional tools and the Citrix tools over that. Some of the key things, as I mentioned, auto scale before. So if you're running a hybrid deployment, you can actually leverage auto scale to power on your on-prem virtual machines and start dialing up to your cloud virtual machines if you start overutilizing your on-prem resources. And you can smartly scale it back down once, back to your on-prem. So you could basically balance and optimize your compute costs. We also introduced security controls like session recording, where you can actually record user sessions. The admin can record user sessions. So these are good for diagnostics or compliance or security audits. We also have what's called app protection and watermarking. So basically, if a Windows virtual desktop or Windows apps in general are accessed via Citrix Workspace client, the Workspace app client, there'll be a watermark over it, or we introduce the ability to mitigate, keyloggers or screen sharing malware that can be installed on endpoint. So basically, all of that gets sent back to, if there's a malware installed on endpoint and a user's accessing sensitive information through Citrix Workspace, all of that threat actor is going to get is basically scrambled information or scrambled screen, so they won't get any sort of sensitive information. And then, yes, as I mentioned earlier, when you're leveraging Citrix, you're also getting the HDX technology on top of that to help accelerate and optimize the end user experience and performance of the Citrix workflow. Now I'm going to go over and hand it over to Cedro, and I'll pop back in once he, with another aspect of how we're also improving the experience.
Thanks, team. So what I wanted to talk about is what AMD is doing to help the graphical experience for the users that are going up in WVD. And the thing that I wanted to start with is really that all workers are remote workers these days. And the Windows 10 desktop experience is a graphical experience. Now, it used to be that it was primarily those apps that were completely optimized for graphics and absolutely required a GPU to work well. But as the modern desktop has progressed, just the normal specialized apps for someone who's a specialist, a power worker, but also knowledge workers are using more graphical. So the experience is a lot more than just crunching 3D images and moving them. So that's the first thing that we want to focus on. And the second thing is that as the IT industry has progressed, the GPU apps, the apps themselves have actually incorporated GPU acceleration just as a most normal thing. So this was primarily done for being in a workstation or on your desktop, but when you move these workloads to the cloud, you really should have a GPU acceleration for these apps and to give that experience that you're expecting on-prem. Secondly, when these applications are moved to the cloud, you want to be able to right-size the resources that you're giving each kind of worker. And that's the innovation that we're talking about with AMD and the NVV4. So up to now, when you were looking at having a specific GPU deployment, really those instances were equipped with one GPU, which gave a really great experience for the one user working in that design for the workstation. And then consequently, it was very cost prohibitive to expand that. Now, for session desktops, for broader usage, that has been working really well with CPU-only instances. But as we've moved on from Windows 7 up to Windows 10 and the more graphical Office 365 experience, that did not give a good user experience and be able to give you the densities that you wanted. The other part that became clear is that there's really no distinction anymore between a desktop, excuse me, a knowledge level worker and a CAD designer in terms of GPU usage, because they can both be either a consumer of graphics or a creator of graphics. So from a GPU point of view, those things look the same. So you actually want some GPU support for all kinds of workers. And so what was needed is a way to give the proper resources to each kind of user. And that's where the NVV4 virtual machines that are now available in Azure, where that comes in. So the goal is to give the modern desktop experience for session desktops and workstations. So what's available are 4 different size VMs. So I'll just point out, in the red here, the different size of GPU memory that's available for each VM, but that's also matched with a properly balanced amount of vCPUs and a proper amount of memory. And really that's enabled by the partnership that we've done with Azure. So it's GPU partitioning, and that allows the GPU to be split up into sizes. So there's a half, a whole, a half, a quarter, and an eighth, and that's so that you can right size the VM for the kind of user that you're deploying for. This is best based on SRIOV, hardware virtualization, and that does 3 or 4 very important things for you. So one is gives you the slicing. The other is that it gives very predictable performance in each VM. So there's no crosstalk between the VMs. There's no noisy neighbor problem between VMs. People can be running entirely different workloads, entirely different OSs, entirely different companies on different VMs next to each other on the same GPU, and there will be no interference. That same isolation also gives you a very secure environment, because there is no shared data, there's no shared memory, so there is no way that anybody working in one portion of the GPU can see anything that's happening or access any data that's being used in the other VM. What we've done is we see that at the high end, workstations are still an important category that needs to be moved to the cloud, but so we've included the same workstation class driver certifications in the cloud that are available in our desktop workstation. So all of those applications that are the key ones that your company depends on are certified and available in the NVV4 machines. And last, the AMD approach is that it's a hardware-based virtualization, so it's a cost-free license. There's no cost to use the GPUs. It's included in the VM price, and you still get that discrete GPU experience. So just to talk a little bit about the technology from AMD that's driving the NVV4s, Azure has adopted two components of that. One is the CPU, the AMD EPYC data center CPUs, and these are using the second generation EPYC. The codename's Rome, and I think if you go around the internet, there's a lot of adoption that's happening in cloud and data centers. So that is what's backing up the VMs from the CPU side, and then the GPU is from a Radeon Instinct product line. Specifically, it's the MI25, and that supports the hardware virtualization and gives you the partitioning performance that I just described. So that's cool. We think there's resources there that a user in a virtual machine can use, but the question is really, what does it look like? Because that's the graphical part. And as Nitin mentioned, there's more to the user experience than just the graphics. There's everything that they're doing in terms of optimizing the DPI, the WAN. So I want to show you an example of what happens when you want to share this resource within a VM. So this is Citrix HDX. We're going to show you what's the experience when there's one user, and assuming when there's 5 users sharing the same VM, and this is in Windows 10 EVD. So let me move over to show you that video.
You're on mute, Isidro.
Hi, thank you. So you've seen the CPU. It's the 7134, 2.4 gigahertz, and there's 32 vCPUs that are allocated and 1 GPU. So this is the large instance. And right now, with the different workloads that are going on with 5 users, it's averaging out at about 32%. So when you go and look at what's happening on the GPU, right now it's only consuming at about 77% capacity for all of these 5 users. And right now we're probably looking at what's happening with user number 5. So when we go back and look at what the GPU is doing, it's right now just consuming 5 out of the 16 gigabytes that are available. And not only just for the display, but also when there's interaction with the desktop VM, because a large portion of what happens with the person's interaction is when they're moving around, opening and closing apps. So all of that is something that can be part of the user experience, and the GPUs help accelerate all that. So this is something that can only be gotten in WVD because it's working with Windows 10 EVD. And right now you saw what's happening with 5 users. So as I mentioned, a key component for us is to make sure that the experience with the interaction with the ISVs is very strong. So we have certifications with the Citrix HDX protocols, with WVD, RDP is there if you choose that. But also for the apps that absolutely need a certification, we have those in place with Autodesk, AutoCAD, Revit, Illustrator, Avid, Esri ArcGIS, PTC Creo, Siemens NX. So for the workstation certs that absolutely need to be there, those certifications are available for NVV4 in those cloud drivers. And the last thing I'll touch on is where can you get it? And right now it's available in 13 different regions in Azure. There's a couple more that will be coming online soon, but basically it's out, it's available, and you can get this experience for your users all around the world whenever you want. So I am going to turn things over to Kevin Rains from Azure to tell you more about the backbone of what Azure provides.
Excellent. Thank you, Pedro. And so while this is coming up, Nitin started by describing the experience, right? And so what I'm going to very briefly cover is how Azure is a platform enabler to meet all of your experience needs. And I'll just pause here until the slide comes up, Isidro.
Okay,
Perfect.
1 second. Here you go.
So look, I can say from my role, right? I'm just a marketing guy. I'm not in engineering and involved in the day-to-day, but there are constant emails and processes where I get involved in terms of rolling out capabilities around the world. This is a continual investment on our part. And I think the important thing to say here is, look, we recognize that you as a customer, wherever you may be doing business, whatever countries you may be operating from, industries that you're in, or just the very nature of your business, you could have very unique requirements. And so we take a lot of pride, we put a lot of effort into making sure that you have access to what you need and where you need it, and so that you can operate within whatever regulations or business requirements that you may have. Isidro, if you can go next. But that's the plumbing, right? You have the scalability, the access that you need. We also recognize that compliance, that certification is incredibly important. So from a product team perspective, within our go-to-market rollouts, we certainly test and certify everything as it's coming to market. We also, though, work with partners like AMD, like Citrix, to make sure that what they're bringing to market is also under this umbrella of making sure that things are trusted. So again, this is part of the platform as an enabler so that you don't have to worry about these things. It's just part of our motion. And then lastly, Isidro, you can go to the next slide. And candidly, this is the most interesting. There's just not enough time to go into this in great detail. Certainly, every single product team puts a ton of work into security, right? It's part of their testing, it's part of their DevOps process. But on top of all of that, we have made a lot of investments with security personnel to make sure that the overall platform is secure. And there's some fascinating things that are part of this. Again, there's not enough time to describe it, but when events come up, and thankfully that doesn't happen very often, there's a dedicated SWAT center where people can get together. But probably the most interesting thing here is there's just an immense amount of automation. Think things like machine learning, where we're automatically detecting irregularities on a regular basis, and these things are just automatically handled. People don't have to get involved, or if there is something that's sufficient enough, it gets raised for people to get involved. But the important point on this slide is, look, security should just work. It shouldn't have to be something that you need to worry about. And so this is something where we continue to invest. We will continue to invest to ensure you have a platform to enable the experiences that you need. With that, I'll hand it back to Nitin, I think.
All right. Thank you. So just wanted to switch over to some of the new things that we're doing from a Citrix perspective on improving the end user experience. And when we're talking about it, think about like some of the apps that Isidro mentioned earlier, like how these are specifically corporate applications that a number of users are used to using whenever they walk in and start their day. But it's also, let's see, I'm trying to see if I can switch the slide here. So yeah, so it's kind of going into where, you know, as every employee, you know, we sit down, we're hired to do specific tasks. Me being in marketing, there's a specific type of applications that I use on any given day. But there's a number of those apps that are just underutilized. So when we think about it is, I only maybe need to use a subsection or subset of what a specific application can do. And you know, like there's a number also on any given day, a number of applications that I interact with and have to jump back and forth between various applications. So I'm going to use an example. It's kind of where we talk about how we're revolutionizing and changing the way that users work. And that's with the Citrix Workspace. So let's take an example of Maria here. Maria is also, you know, an employee that's going to start her day, and she's like anybody day, like she's got some vacation coming up, and hopefully this video plays pretty relatively smooth on your end, but she's now logging into Workday, and she only specifically uses Workday for the need to request time off. So she logs in, jumps around, goes in and specifically requests her time off and submits it for her boss. But in the middle of doing that, she realizes she's also got a message from her Microsoft Teams on basically a status or an approval, or actually checking to approve an expense report that's outstanding, that's within her inbox. So she jumps over from Microsoft Teams over to SAP Concur, and then she realizes also ahead of her meeting, she needs to put in a incident request because her soft phone didn't work. So she hops over to her ServiceNow instance, and then she also gets an email from her boss checking, requesting the status for a specific deal that closed. So she has to hop over to Salesforce, and then she kind of jumps over to that, checks the status on the deal, and has to go back over to her Outlook to email back her boss that was asking for that status update. So basically what you saw in this scenario required 6 different apps, each with a different interface, each requiring their own clicking and scrolling, between the two. So basically a number of applications, a lot of little usage, and switching back and forth. So our intention is to basically stream that process with the Citrix workspace and improving the end user experience, employee experience, much like we're working with AMD to improve the experience of overall graphically intensive applications. It's all about improving that experience, which can lead to improved productivity, better customer satisfaction, higher profitability, and improved growth rates. And we do that with the Citrix workspace. So from us, we are all about aggregating all of the apps, desktops, and content into that one single unified experience. So from this perspective, this is a quick snapshot of the Citrix workspace and that new UI. But instead of jumping back and forth between the various tabs and going in applications, we actually, with the Citrix workspace, it's all about giving her the apps here that she's going to utilize. So this would be some of the graphically intensive applications or SaaS apps that she's going to maybe utilize for her workday, and all of her desktops. Now this can be her on-prem desktops or cloud desktops like a Windows virtual desktop. And also her files are also in one location here as well, so she doesn't have to navigate within a repository and get away from an application that she's utilizing. But the way that we're changing things is basically instead of having her go into and launch SAP Concur, is she can actually just improve her expense report directly from her activity feed, her home feed. Basically, it's aggregating a lot of her activities or requests that she has in any given day when she first logs in. So she could just simply what's called improve that expense report through what we're doing here is creating like a little micro app for that activity within SAP. So with micro apps, she can just go ahead and improve the expense report without having to log into fully SAP. She could also put in her incident report or create an incident report directly from her actions. So she can create an incident report or ServiceNow ticket here, or she can do create a calendar event. So basically, instead of having log in, she could just do it here. And she also can send information back into Microsoft Teams through what's called send to Teams. So basically, she can share information directly from our workspace into Teams instead of having to go fully into it. So it's all about less content switching, less jumping around between applications, with the intention of improving that experience of that typical day-to-day activity. So that's just a brief snapshot. We have a number of details as far as that go, really in depth on how we're doing that, but I just figured we'd highlight that really quickly here on how together Citrix and AMD are working to improve that experience. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Rubel, and he can go a little bit more in detail as far as this claiming your gift.
Thank you so much, Nitin, and Kevin and Isidro. It's been a great presentation from you guys. So ladies and gentlemen, now's the time to ask your questions. As I said earlier, if you have any specific questions you want to ask Kevin, Isidro, or Nitin, please do type in your questions panel, and we'll be happy to answer those. In terms of how you can claim your gift, pretty simple. As as we said, every 10th attendee on this webinar will receive this set of wireless earbuds, provided you're based in the US. Sorry about that. And pretty simple. We'll send you an email in the next 24 hours asking where you want us to ship the gift. And once you give us the address, it'll be on your way. And I guess now let's move on to Q&A. So let me see if we have any questions coming up. Yes, we do have a couple. So this one's for you, Isidro. Can the partitioning be dynamically reallocated as the user changes the work they're doing?
Not within the VM. So once the VM is configured for that size partition, then they stay with that. But what you could do is with the Citrix tools and WVD tools is move people to different VMs as needed.
Okay, gotcha. There's another one. Do you have statistics around multi-session experience on Windows 10 with the AMD vGPU sharing?
We have some. That's actually one of the upcoming webinars that we have going on. And what the key there is which apps are interesting to people. So what you can do is email us. Go to amd.com/nvv4. There's our contact information there, and send us what you'd like to see, and they'll work on some webinars to present that.
Okay, another follow-up to that question. Are there test results for heavy apps like Autodesk Revit? I guess for that as well, they can send you an email.
Yeah. So what we've seen is that down to the 1/2 and 1/4 VMs are when shared as VDI. These certified apps, the Revit, Illustrator, we work great in those environments. And we have seen the workstation results be, the results be very comparable to the workstation experience, even remote, and especially going over the Citrix environment. So that's one of the things that we'll be including in the upcoming webinars, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't working well.
Okay, sure. So those are all the questions I see right now. So we have, I guess, a couple of more minutes. So guys, if you have any other questions, please feel free to type them in. And while we're waiting, Isidro, if people want to find out more about the AMD solution, where can they go?
Easiest place to go is www.amd.com/nvv4. And they'll get you right to everywhere we have information more about the VMs, the protocols, and the different VM sizes as well.
Awesome, great. And Nathan, on Citrix side, are there any specific landing pages, or would it be just citrix.com?
Yeah, a lot of our information is on citrix.com. The other thing that is for folks that are looking to get a lot of the latest feature updates or feature news, our citrix.com/blog sites is usually pretty up to date when it comes to features released, and there will usually be a coinciding blog on that. So while our web page itself does a really good job of highlighting a lot of what we're doing, citrix.com/blogs is more of a area where I'll kind of get all the latest information as far as what we're doing.
Gotcha, awesome. Kevin, anything on the Microsoft side if you want to learn more about Azure?
Yeah, you bet. So there's 3 locations. You can go to azure.com/HPC, and that will give you the overall HPC solution. Visualization is one of those areas, so you'll see that workload there. You can go to the virtual machine pricing pages, so you'll see the information about NVV4 there. And then lastly, there are docs pages where we can have there's more technical information to meet your needs, but I would go with what Isidro said and go to AMD first on that, and then you can go to Azure for additional information.
Awesome, great. All right, guys, thanks once again for great presentations. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this. And as I said, we are recording this webinar, and please expect a copy of the recording in your inbox in the next 24 hours. With that, I guess we are at the end of it. Thank you so much. This is Rubal Walia signing off, and hopefully I'll see you on our next webinars. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.